Hello, everyone, and welcome to Palmetto Sports Daily. Rick Henry here in Columbia, joined today by Tegan Brown in Myrtle Beach, Caroline Sorrow in Greenville, and Kevin Bilodeau down on the coast down in Charleston. Hello, everyone, and we've got the NFL draft coming up starting on Thursday. And this time, the draft is going to be taking place in Pittsburgh. And I know a lot of folks around the Carolinas are wondering what the Carolina Panthers are going to do. They're coming off a season where they won a divisional championship. They made the playoffs. They were knocked out in the first round, but still, the Panthers, a team that has struggled the past few seasons, just trying to put wins together. How can they build on this? And one way is through the draft. Now, we have some comments from General Manager Dan Morgan talking about what one of their aims is going to be when they start, picking on Thursday.
Every year is important for everybody, including myself. We want to win. We're all committed to winning. I think, Bryce is no different. Myself is no different. We all are committed to winning. We all want to win. That's the ultimate goal, is to win a Super Bowl. Bring a championship back here to Charlotte. In terms of playmakers, of course, we always want to add as many playmakers as you can on both sides of the ball, not just, a receiver. So I think, when we talk about the type of guys that we want to bring in here, we want guys that make plays, whether it's a DB taking the ball away or it's a receiver, running back scoring touchdowns. We want guys that are going to come in here and be playmakers.
Okay, so the Panthers have the 19th pick in the first round. And so you heard Dan Morgan. He wants playmakers on both sides of the football. And I think when you start talking about the Panthers offense, getting Bryce Young some help, mainly at the receiver position. And what could that mean for the X-Man, Xavier Legette, the former Gamecock? Because really, when he's talking about big plays that were made by the Panthers receivers last year, not many by that guy. So, Kevin, I'll throw it out to you. What do you think the Panthers need most?
Well, there's a lot of things they need coming into this draft, and receiver is certainly one of them, because I think after 2 years, I think we're ready to say Legette maybe – he could still be a contributor on this team, but I don't think he's going to be a top 10 wide receiver like I think the Panthers were hoping when they took him in the first round a couple of years ago. But I think after taking Ted McMillan last year with a top 10 pick in the first round, I don't know if you want to take a receiver again for the third straight year in the first round. And really what I would like to see Carolina focus on is the offensive line and just getting some help right up front for Bryce Young and getting someone that can maybe keep him on his feet a little bit longer than he's been the last couple of years. It feels like he is always under pressure, and maybe, you give him an extra second or two, and then maybe that's going to give Legette a chance to get more open and get away from guys and just open things up a little bit more, Caroline. So really, if I'm the Panthers, offensive line is where I'm focusing in that first round.
Yeah, well, here's the thing, guys. I mean, we're really previewing kind of everybody that they could take across the board, because per all of the Panthers mock drafts, they have them going safety and they have them going tight end with that number 19 pick in the first round. I agree with you, Kevin, on the offensive line. I mean, the Panthers did have a couple pieces that were kind of in and out injured last year, but it does feel like Bryce Young is constantly under duress. I mean, he got a little bit better, played a little bit better kind of in those high pressure situations, I feel like, but then he had the ankle issue and he's getting hit all the time. And so I think getting him some protection is a big deal. But that said, on the mock draft, the Panthers have Dylan Thieneman, who is a safety out of Oregon. That's kind of one of the picks across the board that a lot of the experts, all the analysis guys kind of see them taking. But they also, if he drops this far, going for another duck, have them going after tight end Kenyon Sadiq. I don't think he will drop all the way to 19. He's a pretty highly touted prospect out of Oregon there, but those are a couple guys that they are leaning on. And so I think that's interesting, especially adding another weapon for Bryce Young when it's clear that Teterow and McMillan and maybe Jalen Coker are your kind of 1-2 punch there. I think you're going to have those guys locked up, and I think that maybe the offensive line is, another spot that needs some help. You can get a guy that could start immediately out of the draft as well. So it'll be really interesting. They kind of have an interesting spot at 19 where it could depend on who slides. Dan Morgan said in that press conference that they're going to draft with the mindset of best player available. So I guess we'll see who that is when number 19 rolls around, Tegan.
Yeah, definitely. And it's kind of interesting to see. I know when Dan Morgan spoke last week, he was saying they could really take any position. It seems like this week they've at least kind of narrowed it down, just saying they want a playmaker. But again, that can be any position. It can be anybody. So number 19 is kind of an interesting place. I'm personally hoping that they do get some help on the O-line, Kevin. I know that Bryce Young has somehow managed to learn how to adapt to these high-pressure situations, which is great to see for as long as he's been with the team now. But at the same time, you want to give your quarterback the time to think and actually let the rest of your guys make some plays too, Kevin.
Yeah, Caroline, you mentioned tight end's a spot they're looking at too for that 19th pick. That's an interesting spot because it's someone who could help on the offensive line a little bit in the run game and also open up in the pass game. But tight end to me feels like a spot that you kind of focus on, especially early on in that first round when you're a little bit closer to being a more complete team. If you're a team that's made a deep run into the playoffs and you're just kind of trying to fill a little, smaller holes here and there, that's when I think you take a tight end. Unless you're talking about a guy like who's going to just come in and be one of the top 2 or 3 tight ends in the league. You're talking about a guy like Rob Gronkowski from a couple years ago. Other than that, if that's not what you're going to get out of this guy, I would focus more up front on the line or really, safety, linebacker, just pretty much anywhere else I would go before I'm taking a tight end in the first round, Caroline.
Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree with you. I mean, I think it's a consensus here that they need help on the offensive line. That said, there's probably a lot of guys that have, tried to get healthy over the course of the offseason that, like we mentioned, they had some of those injuries that really plagued them last year. There was, I believe, in the Bills game when they got beat for, and didn't look great when Andy Dalton was in there starting in place of the injured Bryce Young. They had like 3 offensive linemen go down in the same game, and then they were kind of like, working people back in onto the line that I can't remember the exact number, but the amount of different combinations that they had on the offensive line last season because of all of those injuries was a large number, and it's hard to get everybody set and accustomed to playing behind that, especially if you're Bryce Young. I mean, you have some guys that are succeeding on this side, some guys that are not, and you have a weak spot here, and it's like it's hard to know what to expect. So I mean, I would go with the offensive line as well. But that said, if they don't feel like there's a guy that's best player, that's the best player available when they get to that spot, who knows? It sounds like they're going to draft based on those terms and who's the best looking fit when they get to that spot, Rick. All right, guys, we are going to take a quick break. We will be right back after this with a little bit more Palmetto Sports Daily.
Welcome back into Palmetto Sports Daily. We're going to talk some baseball. We've got Coastal Carolina, the 9th-ranked team in the country, heading on the road for their midweek game tonight, heading to UNCW. Now, the Seahawks have lost 6 out of their last 8 games. The Chants, on the other hand, they just secured a series win over Georgia State. They lost that series finale on Sunday, and then they also lost their midweek battle last week against Wake Forest, so that did cause the Chants to drop from number 7 to number 9 in the top 25, but it's looking like they're going to get a little bit of strength added on here pretty soon. Cam Flukie expected to make a return this weekend. It's unknown if he'll play yet, but he should be out there. Trace Mazan also expected to be back on Friday, one of their best guys at the plate, so they could be getting a little bit of help added, which could help them even more, even though they are in a pretty good position right now for the season. Kevin, I know there's some action in the Low Country as well.
Yeah, third straight Tuesday, we've got an inner-low country matchup. This time it's Charleston Southern going on the road to face off against the College of Charleston. First time for these two teams to meet this season. CSU has taken on the Citadel each of the last 2 Tuesdays, one at home, one on the road. Dropped both, including last week at home when they gave up an 11-run 5th inning against the Citadel and dropped that game. I believe it was 15-4 was the final there. Tonight they get a chance to go up against the College of Charleston. CFC kind of been up and down this entire season. Every time it looks like they've got some momentum going, they drop a couple of games. That was the case last weekend as well, as they were on the road outside of the Low Country. But looking to gain a little bit of momentum here tonight as they take on their crosstown rivals from CSU. Caroline.
Yep, Clemson and USC Upstate also in action tonight. And if you guys remember back to last season, it is a rematch of what we saw in the NCAA regionals out there at Clemson. The Tigers ended up winning that game 7-3. Here's some video of both of them getting some practice in out at Doug Kingsmore Stadium ahead of that regional matchup. But that game, if you guys remember, I mean, it was, wow. I mean, it was a good one. USC Upstate led for most of the way. The game was tied in the 8th inning, and then the Clemson legend Cam Cannarella hit a 2-run homer that ended up pushing Clemson over the edge. They get that 7-3 win. The Tigers actually lead this series 11-3, and they are 8-2 against the Spartans in Clemson. And both of them are, you know, maybe not in the same spot as they were last year. I mean, Upstate had one of the highest powered offense in Division I baseball at this point in the year last year. Clemson, of course, was in position to host that regional last year. These two teams looking a little bit different this time around. Upstate sitting at 9-18 on the road. They're 19-22 overall. They're coming off a sweep, or being swept, I should say, by Winthrop, while Clemson is 25-16. Had a little bit of their struggles in ACC play, sitting at 6-12 in the conference, second to last in the ACC. So both of these teams, safe to say, they are looking for a win. It's the first half of a home-and-home, so they'll play again on May 12th. But Rick, with these two teams going at it and both of them, you know, kind of needing a little bit of a boost and getting back on the right track, what are you looking to see from the Spartans and the Tigers tonight?
Well, I'm looking for a spicy contest. That's what I'm looking for because, you know, USC Upstate, no matter what the sport, if they're going to be taking on Clemson or South Carolina, they want to show that, hey, we're not just a little brother here in the Palmetto State. And the Gamecocks, they're looking to bounce back from a weekend sweep by Mississippi State. So South Carolina is hosting Presbyterian tonight, and they're hoping that they can get on track here and get some momentum going. But they're coming off a series where they just couldn't get the bats going. They struck out, I think, 18 times on Saturday. They were shut out in that game, 9-0. And so it's just a struggle under interim head coach Monty Lee, especially when it comes to their offense. So hopefully they can get the bats going against PC tonight. That's going to do it for this segment of Palmetto Sports Daily. We'll be right back after a quick timeout.
Welcome back into Palmetto Sports Daily. We're going from baseball to basketball because the transfer portal is a thing and it's always busy, especially on the men's side of things for Clemson men's basketball. The Tigers picking up another guy in the portal yesterday afternoon, I should say. He's a transfer from TCU, Latarius Lelevicius, and he is known for his abilities from beyond the arc. He shot 38% from 3 last season. He also averaged 7.9 points a game and 3.4 rebounds. He's also 6'8". So Clemson brings in a replacement that seemingly will come in and, replace Jake Wallin, who transferred to BYU a couple of weeks ago. And it's the third transfer edition now for the Tigers. They added Notre Dame's Cole Serta and also Dylan Faulkner from Samford, another big guy inside. And so it'll be interesting to kind of see what head coach Brad Brownell does. I mean, he rolled with 13 players last year, but then of course Zach Foster's injury kind of complicated things from a personnel and depth standpoint. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what he does if they bring in another scholarship player. I'm not sure. Kevin, what are you thinking about this addition for the Tigers, who brings in some three-point shooting when they lost three-point shooting and the graduation of Dylan Hunter, and then also losing Butta Johnson to the portal as well?
Yeah, it's something Clemson certainly needed, and especially if you got a 6'8" guy who can bring defenders out a little bit and spread the floor at least a little bit, depending on how well his shooting is. That's something that's going to be really big for Brad Brownell. So hopefully that works out for the Tigers. College of Charleston has also been really busy in the transfer portal, especially over the last couple of days as John Gross starts filling out his first roster as the head coach of the Cougars. We mentioned earlier this week that they brought in former South Carolina guard Eli Ellis, and I'm thinking that's a big addition for CFC, a guy who could put up a lot of shots and create his own shot pretty well as well, especially down at the CAA level. Yesterday, they took care of the inside a little bit. They bring in a 7-footer from Villanova, Braden Pierce. Not a guy who didn't play a whole lot at Villanova. I think he averaged just over a point a game last season. But you bring in a 7-footer in the CAA, that's a guy who, at the very least, should be able to average around 8 or 9 rebounds a contest. I'm not sure how well offensively he's going to fit in with what Gross wants to do, but at the very least, he's a big body, a guy who should be able to bring in a lot of rebounds and fill a big spot for the College of Charleston going forward, Rick.
Yeah, the Gamecocks also trying to get busy in the transfer portal. I just want to mention Eli Ellis. Kind of surprised that he's staying in state, but hopefully he can find his niche there at the College of Charleston. One thing I like about him, Kevin, is his hustle. He's not the biggest guard, but he gets in there and he mixes it up with the big guys. But as far as South Carolina, coming off another losing season, they've added a few additions from the portal. You've got a guard from Drexel, Shane Blakeney, a kid from George Mason, Corey Minson, Camden Hyde from Texas, and a center from Wisconsin, Alexis, not so sure about this last name, but I'll give it a try, Bailauskas. I probably butchered that one. But I know the fans are just waiting to see who else Lamont Paris is going to bring in, because one thing a lot of folks on the outside are saying, hey, they kept him after a second losing season. Are they going to give him the weapons, especially when it comes to the NIL money, to bring in some people who can make a difference? So right now, the jury is still out as far as that goes. Tegan?
Yeah, as for Coastal Carolina, no big transfer acquisitions to talk about just yet, but they were all the difference makers for Coastal last year. Josh Beadle, who came from Boston College, AJ Dantzler, who came from Lemoyne College. Both of those guys were huge playmakers for the Chants, and they'll have to replace them this year because they don't have any eligibility left. So Coastal will really have to attack that transfer portal, hope that they can get some former Power 4 guys to make a difference. We're going to take a quick break here on Palmetto Sports Daily. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Palmetto Sports Daily. We mentioned the NFL draft starting on Thursdays, so we're looking at some of our local guys who may be picked up early. Starting with the Gamecocks. The Gamecocks have sent a lot of defensive backs to the league, and it looks like probably the first 2 guys that will get picked this year also defensive backs. I don't think they'll go in the first round. Brandon Cisse, he's being projected as a second-round pick, and then Jalen Kilgore, he'll probably go primarily in the 3rd round. So Brandon Cisse, Jalen Kilgore, look for those to be the first Gamecocks coming off the board.
And for the Tigers, we got a pair and potentially a third, I think, that will be coming off the board. First, we have on the defensive side of things, Peter Woods and TJ Parker, who have really, their stock rose during their junior years, and then of course dropped off a little bit last year, just probably because of the production of the team as a whole. But both of them still projected going early 1st round. TJ Parker sliding a little bit to early 2nd round, but also offensive tackle Blake Miller. He's on quite a few mock drafts as going late in the 1st round, so that could be an interesting one to keep an eye on. I feel like a lot of times those offensive tackles go pretty early. Guys are trying to get their big guys on the line, and so I think that those are going to be the 3 Tigers that you see taken off the board first. Kevin?
Yeah, we don't have anyone from the Citadel or Charleston Southern that's going to be going, at least not early on in the draft, but we do have a Low Country native that should hear his name called coming up on Thursday night, and that is Georgia offensive lineman Monroe Freeling. He's a guy projected to go anywhere from as high as 6th in the draft to maybe down towards that 25 range. Big offensive lineman from Georgia, like I said, 6'7", Just actually talked to him on Zoom a couple of minutes ago as he's getting ready to host the NFL Network at his house over in Mount Pleasant coming up on Thursday night. Pretty much most projections have him going about 17th in that first round, going to Detroit. He's a guy I would love to see if he falls down to 19th, have Carolina pick him up, and then just put him at left tackle and have him guard Bryce Young for the next 6-7 years going forward. So that could be a big move for Carolina if he's still available. But like I said, I've seen his name go as high as 6th, going to Cleveland in this first round. So really anywhere he could go in this first round, but definitely going to hear his name called and very excited. Would be the first kid from Oceanside Collegiate to be drafted. I believe Sam Hartman, I don't think got drafted out of Notre Dame, but he would be the first guy to go in the first round. So big opportunity for him, Tegan.
Yeah, big opportunity. Not a ton of Coastal to talk about. Really, none. There were no big players this year that decided to join the draft. Most of the players from Coastal entered the transfer portal, so it's a huge new era. But Kevin, I know that wrestling is something we've got to talk about today, right? And you're the expert on that.
That's true on both accounts. And, you know, a guy who had ambitions of the NFL draft at one point ended up going a different route, and it paid off big time for him this weekend in his first WrestleMania. That is Trick Williams, the former South Carolina wide receiver, played under Steve Spurrier all those years ago, wrestled in his first WrestleMania out in Las Vegas this past weekend, won the United States Championship. So huge opportunity for him in his first match in front of 50,000 plus people, and he comes through big time, winning his first singles championship at the main level of WWE, now a member of the SmackDown roster. So Rick, I know you've talked to this guy before, just ton of charisma on him, and just the future is wide open for this guy in the WWE.
Yeah, I'm so happy for him because I never would have thought this guy would wind up being a star for the WWE, because he was a walk-on here at South Carolina, and I got to know him because he just came up to me one day and introduced himself. Very polite young man, and I'm just so thrilled for him. And all I can say is I just hope he just keeps climbing on up the ranks. Yeah, great to see, Kevin.
Absolutely. And even better, his fiance also had her first match at WrestleMania Lash Legend this weekend, too. So big opportunity for that family. We're going to wrap up this edition of Palmetto Sports Daily. We'll see you back here tomorrow.